Hello, I'm Waffles Are Better. In this video, I'll be going over all of the main types of features in Java Edition Minecraft 1.16 and above. To be clear, this video is not about how to actually add those structures into the game. You'll be able to somewhat add them, but probably not as customized as you're going to want. And you might have a little bit of trouble having them generate the way you want. But you are going to need to know this information if you're going to want to make your own custom features. I've had a lot of requests for videos on custom features, and so there are going to be several videos at least on custom features because there's so much to cover and they're so complicated. And in this video, I couldn't even cover all of the feature types. That's why I only chose the main ones that you're probably going to be using. If you check the Minecraft wiki page on custom features, you'll see why it's very, very long. In order to create features, you're going to want to create a new folder in your worldgen folder and call this configured underscore feature. And this is just like configured structure feature, except without the word structure. And then just inside here, you're going to want to create a new file. And since I don't really know what features I'm actually going to want to make, I'm just going to call this feature.json. Oops, .json. And you can name this whatever you want, just like how you can name your biomes whatever you want. But I'm just going to name mine feature.json because I don't know what I'm going to want my final name to be. So in here, you're going to want to put curly brackets, and then in the curly brackets, you're going to want to put in quotation marks type. So since there are so many types of features, I'm only going to be going over the ones that you will most likely actually want to use, and those are the most customizable ones, the ones you can customize the most and be able to actually do anything with. So, for example, I'm going to be skipping the bamboo feature and basalt columns and basalt pillars because those aren't very customizable. And basically, if you're going to want to use something like that, you'll just use the one that is by default in the game. So the first one I'm going to cover is in quotation marks block underscore pile, and this will create a pile of blocks like the piles of hay bales in the villages in Minecraft. So after this, you're going to want to type in quotation marks config, and then a colon, and then curly brackets. And inside of the curly brackets, you're going to want to put in quotation marks state underscore provider, and then curly brackets again, and then in quotation marks here, you're going to want to put type, then a colon, and this can be one of several things. It can be forest flower provider, which just generates forest flowers. It can be plain flower provider, which just generates plains flowers. It can be rotated block provider, it can be simple state provider, or weighted state provider. There's also randomized int state provider, which is more complicated. The way that the game uses it is randomly choosing the age of glow vines to generate in lush caves, which don't exist yet. So the first one I'm going to go over is simple state provider, and as far as I know, this is the same as rotated block provider because you can just put the rotation in the state of the block. You would put state in quotation marks, and then in curly brackets in quotation marks name, and then a colon, and just Minecraft. I'll just do stone as an example. And so if you were going to do actually grass underscore block, then you could also do properties, and then snowy equals false. And that should just create a pile of grass blocks. So this is the same if you do the rotated block provider. You would just do the same thing, except probably you would want to do a rotatable block instead of this. So that could be oak log, and then the property could be axis, and then y, I think, to place right setup logs. Next state provider that you can do is weighted underscore state underscore provider. And basically this is for if you want there to be several different states. So for this, you would delete all of the states and instead put in quotation marks entries, and then a colon, and square brackets, data, and then a curly bracket, name, and then whatever you want it to be. So I'll just do, first thing it recommends, obviously you're not going to want to use occasion buttons, and then you also want to put in quotation marks weight, and then this can just be 1. And so here, let me change this to something you might actually want. So say you have stone, and then if you just copy this and paste here, and then change this to, I don't know, andesite, and change the stone weight to 3. I believe what this would do is generate a pile of blocks where there are 3 times as many stone blocks as andesite. But the next one is called disk, and this is for the clay disks that you find underwater in the swamps. So this one will only generate if it is underwater. So the first thing you're going to want to do is open these curly brackets in config, and then type in quotation marks state, and then a colon, another curly brackets, and in here you're going to want to put in quotation marks name, and so the default for this is Minecraft clay because it's the clay disks. And then again, just like the last one, if you need any properties, you can do properties like this, and then put any properties you want here. So like property and then colon and then that. But clay doesn't have any properties, so you don't need to include that. So then after this, you put in quotation marks radius, radius, and then a colon. And then in radius, you need an integer provider. And basically what that does is it determines what the actual radius of the disk is. So for that, you need to put type and then a colon. And for this, there are 4 different things you can use. There's bias to bottom, clamped, constant, and uniform. So for constant, then all you have to do is put a value, and this will just be the constant value that's always the radius. But this isn't what the game uses. There's also uniform, or there's biased _to bottom, and these are basically the same, except biased to bottom will choose a smaller number more often than the uniform number will. So the uniform number will choose unbiased from a range, and biased to bottom will intentionally choose smaller numbers. So what Minecraft uses for this is uniform, and for value, you need to open up some curly brackets, and in here type min _ inclusive, and this is 2 in the game, and I forgot a comma, and max _ inclusive, and in the game this is 3, I think. So that means the radius of the clay patch will either be 2 or 3. And then there's also the clamp provider, and basically that is the same as uniform, except it takes the results of another provider and puts it inside of the minimum and maximum value. So I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I don't think you're ever really going to need to use it. You can probably just use uniform, bias to bottom, or the constant one. So then after radius, you're going to need to put a comma and type half _ height. I think this determines how thick the disk is. So the default is 1, and then the last thing you need to put is targets, and that's in square brackets. And in here, you need to put all of the targets that are possible for the disk to generate in. So that's curly brackets, and then name, which is the name of the block. So for example, the ones in the game are dirt, and you don't need to put any properties, but as I showed before, you can. But if you do want to put properties, just do it the same way that I showed before. And then you add a comma after this, and add whatever other target you want. So for example, in the game, that is clay. So the next feature, if I just delete all of this, is delta _ feature, and this is going to be somewhat similar to the last one because of the int providers, But so you need to put in quotation marks contents, and what contents is what will actually be inside of the delta. So this is like in the basalt deltas, how there's basalt blocks surrounding lava pools. So this will be a block state provider just like before. So again, you need to put the name of the block. And so by default, this is Minecraft lava, because that's what's inside of the basalt delta. Since lava does have properties, you'll also need to include the properties tag, and property for lava is level, and you're going to want that to be 0. And then after the curly bracket for contents, you want to put a comma, and then put in rim, and this is going to be just like the contents one, except for the thing that surrounds the center of the delta. So that's going to just be by default. And actually, I thought this was basalt. Actually, the block here is magma block in the vanilla feature. So then after this, you need to put size, and this determines how big the feature will generate. This is another int provider, just like in the last one. So that will be type, and then the name of the int provider. So the actual feature in Minecraft uses uniform, and the default values are the min inclusive is 3, and the max inclusive is 7. That means I think the little individual lava pools will be between 3 and 7 blocks big. And then next is rim underscore size, and this is just exactly the same as size, so I can go ahead and copy all of this and paste it after this. Except instead of 3 and 7, the sizes are 0 and 2. So then next is the forest underscore rock feature, and these are the mossy cobblestone boulders that generate in the giant tree taiga biomes. And then this is just a block state tag, so you put state and then the type of block. So if you just wanted it to be stone boulders, then this is what you would put. The next one is going to be the huge brown mushroom feature type. For config, all you have to do is put cap underscore provider type, and then for that I'm going to put the simple state provider, and then state, and just, I don't know, I'll just do stone as an example. And so the cap will be, if you think about a giant brown mushroom, it's all of the actual brown mushroom blocks on top of the mushroom. And then I'm just going to copy all of this, and this can be the stem provider. So for example, if I wanted this to be iron block, then basically it would create an iron block pillar with a stone platform on top. And then after this would be, oops, not that one. After this one would be foliage underscore radius. The foliage radius would be the radius of the cap of the mushroom. So the default radius is 3, because they're usually about a 7 block circle on top of the mushroom. So if I just delete all this, I can move on to Minecraft, and then huge fungus. And what huge fungus is the crimson and warped fungi that are in the nether. So that's config, and then hat underscore state, which is the same as the cap one in the last one. So by default, this is the nether wart block. And then by default, the next one, which is the decor state, is the shroom light, and this is the thing that will generate inside of the cap. And then there's also the stem state. And the stem state is by default, one second, the crimson underscore stem. And then this has the y-axis property, so that's axis is y. And then lastly is the valid underscore base underscore block. This is the block that the crimson fungus or whatever fungus you're making is able to generate on. So that is usually the crimson nylium. Then after this is planted, and this is false by default. I'm not exactly sure what it does, but you should probably leave it as false because that's what it is by default. So there's a few that are identical to other features that come up next. There's the huge red mushroom, which is exactly the same as the huge brown mushroom. There's the ice patch, which is identical to the disc. And there are icebergs, which are basically the same as the forest rocks. So then you have Minecraft Lake. And this basically is just a lake. And all you have to do is put the state of what generates inside of the lake. So that's state, and then just say you want a lake full of water. You would do name as water, and then properties, level 0. So another really useful one that you're probably actually going to want to use is the netherrack replace blobs feature. So this is netherrack underscore replace underscore blobs. Even though the name says netherrack, it doesn't actually need to be netherrack. So what you're going to want to do is state and then just the block state. So if I leave this as, let's say, diamond ore, and then change this the target. Oops, I forgot the comma there. And then if you make the target Minecraft stone, that means it will replace stone in the ground with huge blobs of diamond. And then you can determine how big you want this to be by determining the radius, which is then an int provider, and this is going to be probably uniform, and then since it's uniform, you then also need to put value and then curly brackets, and then min underscore inclusive, and let's say you want the minimum radius to be, I don't know, 3 blocks, which means you would have like a 6x6 clump of diamond, and then the max inclusive could be 4 blocks. So you have a clump of diamond that's between 3 and 4 blocks. So in the next one, which is probably the one that most people are going to use most, is if you delete all the config, one second, this is going to be ore. And the config for ores are size, and this is going to basically determine how big the ore is going to be. And this needs to be a value between 0 and 64. And as far as I can tell, size is the maximum size that ore blobs can be. So for example, for diamond it's 8, and for gold it's 9. So I'm just going to leave this at 8. And after size, there's discard chance on air exposure. And that's a value between 0 and 1. Then that determines how likely it is that if it generates on the wall of a cave, it will no longer actually generate the ore. So if you set this to 0, it'll be completely fine with generating in a cave. If you set it with 1, it'll never generate if there's a cave right next to it. So I'm going to set this to 0. Then next is targets. And this is a list of targets that the block can generate in target. And for this, you're going to want to put predicate underscore type. And you probably want to put either block match or tag match, because what Minecraft itself does is, and it'll do tag match, and then the tag will be Minecraft or underscore replaceables, or sorry, stone or replaceables. And this means that it will generate in stone or I believe also andesite and granite and diorite. And then after this, you put state, and this determines the block that will generate if it's in stone. So this can be Minecraft diamond underscore ore. And then if you want, you can copy all of this like that and change this to, I believe, deep slate ore replaceables, and then this would be deep slate underscore diamond ore. So if it tries to generate in deep slate, it'll generate deep slate diamond ore instead. So the next type is going to be the simple underscore block feature. This basically just generates a block that you can choose where and how it places in your world. So to underscore place is the block that it's actually going to place. And you need to put a state provider, so simple state provider is probably the one you're going to want. And then you also have to do state, and this is just a block state. So I'm just going to copy all of this and paste it, and then change this one to place underscore on, and this is the blocks that it can be placed on. You need to remove that part. Oops, and this should be a square bracket instead of a curly bracket. Okay, I probably shouldn't have just copied that, but this is just what you're going to need. If you want it to be able to place the block on anything else, say I want to change this to diamond block, and if you want to place diamond blocks on stone or grass, you could do grass underscore block. And then next is the place in, and that is for the block that it's placeable in, so that's probably just going to be air. And then finally is place under. And so what place under does is this determines what the block above it can be. So this is probably also going to be air. So the next one is random underscore patch. And this is basically what flowers and fire in the nether use. So it's pretty useful. The first thing you're going to want in config is can underscore replace, and this I think just determines if it can replace blocks that are already there. And so this is by default false, and remember not to put quotation marks around a true or false value. And then the next one is project, and oops, I forgot a comma there. And I can't exactly find the answer for what this does, the project I mean, but I know it's true by default, and it probably determines like the type of placement of whatever you're placing. Then next is need underscore water, and this is just if it needs to generate inside of water, and so this should be false probably. And then there is x spread, and this just determines how much it spreads from the center, and this is about 7 by default. And then there's y spread, and this determines how far it spreads up and down, so that's 3 by default. And then z spread, and that's just the same as x spread but in the z direction. So this basically makes a 7 by 7 circle of patch of stuff. So tries just determines how many times it tries to generate this feature, and that is 128 by default. And then next is the state provider, and that's probably just going to be a simple state provider. So simple state provider, and then state. Let's just say I want it to generate a scattering of diamond blocks, and then next I have to do block underscore placer, and this determines how it's going to place the blocks. So this is probably just going to be Minecraft simple block placer, because that will just place regular blocks. So for example, if you're placing fire, or if you're placing mushrooms or flowers, it can also be double underscore plant underscore placer, and you would use this if you are placing double tall like grass or flowers. And then you can also change this to extra underscore placer. You can also use column underscore placer, and this requires some extra and if you're doing column placer, you also have to specify the size. This is going to be an int provider. So the one for cactus is type and then Minecraft bias to bottom. Oops, pressed the wrong one. Biased to bottom. And the value is min inclusive. is 1, and max underscore inclusive is 3. So that means usually cacti will be about 1 block tall, but sometimes they'll be higher. So using this feature, it would generate a diamond block pillar that is 3 blocks tall. I could also change it to be, I don't know, 20 blocks tall, and then it would be a 20 block tall diamond block pillar. So the last two things you're going to want to put are whitelist, and blacklist. And this is a list of, well, whitelist is a list of all the blocks that it can generate on, and blacklist is a list of all the blocks that it cannot generate on. So if I want my diamond blocks to only generate on, I don't know. If I want them to only generate on stone, then I would put this. But if I want them to be able to generate on anything except for stone, then I would do this. So another very important feature is the tree feature. And that is tree. The first thing you're going to want to put is ignore underscore vines, even if there's vines in the way of generation. And this defaults to false. The next one is force underscore dirt, and this determines if it will force place a specific block under it when it generates. And this is also false by default. The next thing you need is minimum underscore size, and this basically determines how big the tree is. So in here you're going to want to put type, and this is most likely going to be 2 underscore layers underscore feature underscore size. Since this tree feature is so complicated, I suggest looking at the default trees in slicedlime's vanilla worldgen defaults, which is linked in the description, but I'll do my best to go over what all this does. So this could also be 3 layers feature sized, 3 layers feature size, but the majority of the trees in Minecraft use 2 layers feature size. So if it's 2 layers feature size, then you're going to want to put, in quotation marks, limit, and this determines the height of the tree where it differs between the 2 layer sizes. So by default this is 1, but it can be between 0 and 81. And then, so the next ones are lower size and upper size. And this is what limit controls. So at heights of the feature that are lower than this value, it will choose lower size. At heights that are higher than this value, it'll choose the upper size. So lower size is between 0 and 16 and is 0 by default. And upper size is also between, needs an underscore, is also between 0 and 16, and this defaults to 1. So after this, you're going to put dirt underscore provider, and this will only use if force dirt is set to true, or if there's grass or mycelium under the trunk. So this is most likely just going to be simple state provider, and then state. Oh, that's a period instead of a comma. This is probably going to be dirt. And again, this is the block that it will place under the tree. So the next thing you need to put is, you just need to copy all of this and paste it and change this to sapling provider. And so the sapling provider is one of the most important parts of this file because it's what determines where your tree can generate. So usually this would be, I don't know, Minecraft oak sapling or something, and then properties, and then stage 0. So if you want your tree to generate how normal trees would generate, you would put this. But what you can also do is, for example, if I want my tree to generate on ice, I can just put any random block. So, for example, if I just put stone, it will say, would stone be able to be placed there? And if stone can be placed there, then it generates the tree there. So the sapling, of course, can only be placed on like dirt and grass and stuff. So the tree will only generate in places that the sapling for that tree would generate. But if you just put any random block, then the tree can generate everywhere. So I think that is really interesting, and I'm probably going to use that. So the next thing, again, you need to copy all of this, and you're going to want to change this to trunk underscore provider, and this is what provides basically the logs for the tree. So this is probably going to be, I don't know, for example, oak log, and then properties axis is Y, most likely. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And then, so then paste this right here. This is then going to be the foliage provider. Oh, there we go. That's my problem. I accidentally forgot. I put an extra curly bracket there, I think. Okay, I did several things wrong. Yes, so make sure you don't have a comma after upper size here, and make sure that you do have the correct number of curly brackets. So after dirt provider, there should be 2 because of state. After sapling provider, there should be, well, if you're using a sapling and have properties, there should be 3, but I only have 2 because I'm using stone, so it can generate anywhere. After trunk provider, 3. After foliage provider, there should be 1. And then 2, and then there should also be the 2 that come from config and the main one up here. Okay, sorry about that. But anyways, foliage provider is probably going to be something like Minecraft oak underscore leaves, and then properties persistent is false, because this way, if you break the tree, then the leaves will start to decay. Distance is most likely going to be 7. And then this changes depending on how far it actually is away from the tree. After this, you're going to need trunk underscore placer. And this gets a little complicated. So I'm going to try to go into all of this. This can be, so you need to put type, and this can be lots of different things. It can be bending trunk placer, dark oak trunk placer, fancy trunk placer, forking trunk placer, giant trunk placer, mega jungle, straight, and I think that's it. So dark oak is for dark oak trees, fancy is for the fancy oak trees, forking is, I think, for acacia? Yes, forking is for acacia, and then I think bending is for azalea, and then everything else is self-explanatory. So you're probably going to have a straight trunk placer just for the normal oak trees, or birch trees, or spruce trees. So I'm just going to put it that. So next is going to be base underscore height, and this is going to be about how high the tree is. So for example, this is 4 for oak trees and 5 for birch trees, because birch trees are slightly taller. So I'm going to leave this as 4. The next is height underscore rand underscore A, and height underscore rand underscore B. And I understand that the rand stands for random, and I think this is just to make the tree either slightly taller or shorter. I don't know what each of these does, but since oak trees have 2 and birch trees have 2 for rand A, and for height rand B, they both have 0. I'm going to assume that rand A means it can be a total of this many blocks taller, and rand B means it can be a total of this many blocks shorter. But that's just a guess. I don't really have an answer for that. So if you are going to make a bench tree, and I believe, again, that's acacia, I mean, not acacia, azalea, then, so you would choose bending trunk placer, and then this way you also need to have bend length, and this is just in int provider, so that's type, and then probably uniform. I just checked, and yes, it is indeed uniform. And for the value, the min inclusive is 1, so min inclusive is 1, and the max inclusive is, I believe, 2. That means the logs will either bend 1 or 2 blocks out. And then you're also going to need to put, oh wait, oops. Then you're also going to need to put min height for leaves if you have a bent tree, and that's going to be 3 for azalea trees. But again, if you aren't doing a bent tree, then you need to remove all of that and change this back to, I don't know, and change this back to another type, so that's probably a straight chunk placer. So the second to last thing you're going to need is the foliage underscore placer. And foliage placer just determines how the leaves generate. There's a type for this too, just like the trunk placer, and there are lots of types here as well. There's acacia, blob, bush, dark oak, fancy, jungle, and megapine. And there's also pine, random spread, and spruce. So if you choose blob foliage placer, or bush foliage placer, or fancy, or jungle, you are then going to have to put in height, and this is going to be about the height of the blobs. So for birch trees, this value is 3, and then next is radius. This is how far away from the tree the leaves will generate, and for birch, this is again going to be 2. And then last is offset, and for birch, this is 0, and this is likely how far away from the tree the leaves will generate, or like how far up or down or something. There isn't an explanation for this anywhere. But that, again, is only if you are using blob foliage placer, or bush, or fancy, or jungle. If you instead switch this to the spruce foliage placer, instead of height, you're going to have trunk height. And this is going to be an int provider just like before. Type is going to be... Don't know why it's doing this, it's very annoying. Uniform, and value is going to be... You know, if it doesn't stop doing this, I'm there. Is that the problem? No. What is it doing? Alright, it's not letting me do this, so I'll just talk about it instead. Alright, so since it's giving me so many error messages, and the thing is going crazy, I'm just going to talk about what you need to do instead. So if it's spruce foliage placer, you're going to need to provide the radius and offset using an integer provider, and same with another one called trunk underscore height. And if it's pine foliage placer, if it's pine foliage placer, it's height, and it's crown height for mega pine foliage placer. And I think they all basically do the same thing. And it's also foliage height for random spread foliage placer. Yeah, but this is really annoying me, so I'm not going to go into those right now. The last thing you need to do is put decorators, and this is just going to be all the decorators you have. But if you don't want any, just put empty square brackets, and however, you can also add a decorator by doing type, and then trunk underscore vine, leaf underscore vine, cocoa, beehive, or altar underscore ground. And trunk vine adds vines on the trunk, like on the jungle trees. Leaf vine adds them on leaves, like in swamp trees. Cocoa adds cocoa beans, beehive adds beehives, and altar ground alters the ground. So if it's cocoa or beehive, so for example, cocoa, you're going to put probability. Oops, I think that needs to be lowercase. And then this needs to be between 0 and 1. So this will just determine how many of these cocoa beans are generating. Then if you do alter ground, that just alters the ground under it. And you're going to want to put a block provider just like up here. So what I'm going to do in this video is actually going to be slightly different. I'm not going to place this in my world because I'm not quite sure what features I want, and I'm not going to have a download because it wouldn't make sense to only have one feature to download. So I'm going to have slicedlime's vanilla default worldgen pack in the description, and I'm going to suggest that you download that pack instead because it's got all the default vanilla features. But I haven't even... This is just a beginner tutorial. I'm probably going to be doing more videos on features because there's so much to cover. And I haven't even gone into decorators yet, and I've even skipped over some of the features. So there's definitely going to be more videos on this soon. this is probably just part 1. With this tutorial, you probably won't even be able to make features generate in your world. You'll just be able to make the beginning parts of features. That's it for this video. If you want me to go into any of the things I skipped over in this video, or if you want me to go more in depth to some of the features in this video, then let me know in the comments. And if there's anything else you want me to do in future videos, then you can tell me those things in the comments as well. If you have any questions about anything I covered today, again, you can ask me those in the comments. And for any of that, you can also join my Discord server, which will be linked in the description. Again, I know I've been saying this in all of my videos recently, but I really appreciate every single one of you. One of my videos recently reached 1,000 views, and I really didn't expect that ever. And currently, as of recording, I am almost to 170 subscribers, and that is 70 in 20 days. And that's just, I really didn't expect to ever get that many subscribers. So I appreciate every single one of you, and I'm really happy that I can help people make things that they want to make. Thank you so much for watching.